Rolex makes some of the most iconic watches on the planet, but not every reference belongs on your wrist. Some will drain your money, sit on gray market shelves below retail, and leave you wondering why you ever bought in. Others quietly outperform stocks, hold wait lists for years, and only get harder to find. Today we are ranking the 5 worst and 5 best Rolex watches you can actually buy right now. Number 5 on the worst list is the vintage Cellini. To be specific, this is not about the modern Cellini lineup from 2014 onward. This is about the small, manually wound gold dress watches Rolex produced from the 1960s through the 1980s. The market tells a brutal story. Dealers consistently report that many of these references trade near or below the melt value of their gold cases. The reason is simple. The modern collector does not want a 33mm gold dress watch from 1974. The entire energy of the Rolex gray market runs on steel sports models and tool watches with stories. A vintage Cellini ticks none of those boxes. Liquidity is just as bad as the pricing. These watches can be genuinely difficult to sell without a heavy discount. On collector forums, buyers openly question asking prices of $3,000 to $4,000 and point to better alternatives for the same money. You are not buying a Rolex in the sense most people mean it. You are buying a small gold bracelet with a crown on the dial, and very few people lining up behind you. If weak demand is one problem, a polarizing design is another thing entirely. That brings us to number 4 on the worst list. Number 4 is the Rolex Air King, reference 116900, produced from 2016 to 2022. Rolex launched it as a tribute to aviation, but what they delivered was a polarizing dial in modern Rolex history. Bold yellow and green accents, instrument-style minute numerals mashed with explorer-style Arabic indices. The crown was yellow, and the logo was green. It looked less like a coherent tool watch, and more like a prototype that escaped the design department before anyone signed off. Major outlets like Fratello spent years predicting it would be discontinued. When Rolex finally replaced it with the updated reference 126900, reviewers openly admitted they had never warmed to the previous version. Market data confirmed the sentiment. The 116900 was consistently one of the easiest steel Rolex sports references to obtain, with almost no gray market premium during a period when nearly every other steel sports model traded well above retail. The Air King name carries real heritage. The 116900 execution simply did not carry the watch. This next one is a different kind of problem entirely. A watch that created a bubble, peaked at prices nobody should have paid, and came back down hard. Number 3 on the worst list is the Oyster Perpetual 41 in its Stella dial variants, reference 124300, specifically the turquoise, yellow, and coral red editions. When these landed in 2020, the gray market went into full frenzy. At its peak, the turquoise dial climbed to over 25,000 euros on the secondary market, off a retail base sitting around 6,500 euros, nearly 4 times the boutique price, for a 3-handed watch with no complication and no date. By 2024, prices had corrected sharply. Turquoise examples were trading around 18,000 to 19,000 euros. Anyone who bought near the top is sitting on a real loss. The caliber 3230 inside is excellent, but the massive spread between color variants is driven entirely by hype and scarcity, not by any technical difference between a turquoise and a black dial. When you are paying 3 times retail for a color choice, you are not investing in watchmaking. You are betting on fashion not going out of fashion. The next entry scales the problem up with a concept that never should have left the drawing board. Number 2 on the worst list is the Sea Dweller Rolesor, reference 126603. 2-tone steel and 18-karat yellow gold are threaded through a watch engineered for saturation divers working at over 1,000 meters underwater. It uses the caliber 3235, includes a helium escape valve, and has water resistance to 1,300 meters. Serious tool watch credentials, dressed in precious metal. That is exactly the contradiction. Rolex took a hardcore professional instrument and ran yellow gold through the bezel, crown guards, and bracelet links. Monochrome watches called it a controversial version of an already controversial watch, and the market agreed. WatchGuy's data shows the 126603 typically trading below its boutique price of around $18,000 on the secondary market. In a world where most steel sports Rolex trade above list, a reference that bleeds value at the door is a clear signal. The watch world has a deep bias against two-tone sports models, and the Sea Dweller Rolesor sits at the extreme end of that spectrum, and now the single worst Rolex you can buy. The previous entries each had one flaw. This one has a structural problem built into its DNA. Number 1 on the worst list is the Yacht-Master II, reference 11668. It is a 44mm steel regatta chronograph. The ring command bezel programs a countdown directly into the movement. The mechanical memory function stores the sequence between adjustments. The engineering is genuinely impressive, and almost nobody needs it. This complication was designed for competitive regatta sailing, not casual sailing. Competitive, professional, timed racing. The pool of buyers who will ever use it as intended is vanishingly small, and the secondary market fully reflects that reality. WatchGuy's data shows the 116680 trading around $17,000 pre-owned, against a boutique price near $18,700. It loses money the moment it leaves the store. In a market where the Sub, the GMT, Pepsi, and the Daytona all trade significantly above retail, buying a watch that immediately bleeds value is impossible to justify. Impressive engineering. Wrong audience, wrong price. That is the 5 worst. Now the list flips, and so does everything else. Number 5 on the best list is the Datejust 41, the steel references in the 126334 and 126300 family. Not the watch collectors fight over at boutiques. No waitlist mythology attached to it. What it has is 15 years of data that most hype pieces cannot touch. Bob's Watches tracked 50,000 transactions across Rolex's catalog from 2010 to 2025. The Date just emerged as the most traded model in the entire dataset, with average resale rising from around $1,150 in 2010 to $8,500 by 2025. A 639% increase. Not a spike. A slow compounding climb backed by the deepest buyer base in the Rolex ecosystem. The 126334 with a fluted bezel retails around $11,100, but typically trades $12,000 to $16,000 on the secondary market. The Date just proves you do not need to chase headline pieces. Sometimes the quiet ones win. Strong resale is one thing. The next watch adds genuine mechanical complexity to that equation, and the market has finally started to price it properly. Number 4 on the best list is the Sky Dweller, specifically the white Rolesor reference 336934. When Rolex introduced it in 2012, the reaction was mixed. It was a large, complicated watch at a steep price in a market that still favored simpler references. The proposition has since become undeniable. It has an annual calendar, an off-center dual-time display, and a ring command bezel that controls both functions with no pushers and no extra crown positions. Everest's data for 2025 places reference 336934 at a retail of around $16,800, with a secondary market range running from $20,000 to $30,000. That is up to 80% above boutique price. The Sky Dweller remains underappreciated in mainstream culture compared with the Sub or the Daytona. That gap between recognition and performance is closing fast, and the people who bought early are sitting on serious gains. The next one needs no introduction, but the data behind it might still surprise you. Number 3 on the best list is the Submariner Date, reference 126610LN. Black bezel, black dial, steel. The most recognized watch silhouette on Earth across 60 years of film, military, sport, and business. The 126610LN carries the caliber 3235 with a 70-hour power reserve and a parachrome hairspring. Retail sits near $10,650. Average secondary market prices held around $17,300 through 2025, even after a broad market correction. The spread between retail and market means finding a steel Submariner at list price is already a financial event. The demand is global, the buyer base is deep, and the design has shown zero signs of cultural fatigue in 6 decades. The Submariner does not need a story. It is the story. 2 left. Both command premiums well above the Submariner, starting with the one where even the color of the bezel determines how much money you make. Number 2 on the best list is the GMT-Master II, references 12671 BLRO and 12671 BLNR. The Pepsi and the Batman. Bob's Watches puts GMT-Master II appreciation at approximately 506% since 2010. Built on a watch people actually use daily, the GMT hand tracks a second time zone. The bidirectional ceramic bezel locks it in place. The caliber 3285 drives it. Real function, not just a story. Everest's data puts the Pepsi at over $20,000 on the secondary market, against an $11,100 retail price. The Batman trades around $15,000. The gap is not driven by mystery. It is driven by the fact that Rolex cannot make enough of them, and waitlists at authorized dealers stretch years in most markets. The Pepsi and Batman nicknames are not marketing. They are collector shorthand for 2 of the most coveted watches on the planet. Number 1 is the single Rolex reference with the strongest combination of market data, cultural weight, mechanical credibility, and long-term upside. It is the Rolex Daytona, references 116,500 LN and 126,500 LN. Steel, chronograph, motorsport mythology, going back to the 1960s. Paul Newman, Le Mans, decades of endurance racing in the DNA. But mythology alone does not keep a watch at the top of every value ranking for 30 years. What does is chronic undersupply against a buyer base that never shrinks. Retail sits around $16,000. Secondary market prices range from $24,000 to $30,000 and above, a 50 to 90% premium over boutique, consistently. Multiple independent rankings name the Daytona as Rolex's #1 reference by asset performance. The movement inside is caliber 4130, developed entirely in-house with a column wheel, a vertical clutch, and a 65-hour power reserve. Not a borrowed movement, not an outsourced caliber. One of the most carefully engineered chronograph movements in current production, inside the most desired watch Rolex makes. Waitlists at authorized dealers stretch beyond 5 years in some markets. Pre-owned examples hold value through corrections, economic cycles, and every shift in collector sentiment. The Daytona has no weak point in this equation. Like and subscribe for more.